Okay, so we are now recording. So we're July 2023 commercial training. Today we're going to talk about industrial real estate. I just want to let everybody know that next month, I believe it's August 22nd, we're going to have a guest trainee. We're going to have Sheila Long here to talk to us about 1031 exchanges. So she's going to do a training next month. Again, it'll be via Zoom and go over 1031 exchanges. So it's a really good presentation. Hope everybody can make it. And it's the usual time at 10 o'clock on the fourth Tuesday of each month and everything. So, all right, let's do a quick round of introductions and then we can get started. So we'll start with Lori.
Oh, hi. Hey, all right. Nice to meet you guys. My name is Lori. I'm a new real estate agent. Husband's family has a whole bunch of commercial extensive property holdings. So I'm also going to learn commercial since someday I'll probably be actively involved in that also.
Great. Nice to have you on, Lori. Suzanne. We'll go on to Joseph.
Okay, I had to unmute myself.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah, here I am. Well, 15 years of selling real estate, 4 years as a licensed residential appraiser, and I worked for 3 MAI appraisers doing research on their commercial industrial appraisals, research, photos, taping, and getting the rental information.
Okay, great. Sounds like you have a lot of experience with industrial. So good. All right, Joseph, how are you today?
Great. How are you?
Good.
Joseph Nelson. I've been a real estate agent for about 1.5 years now. With Bliss, I think we're about 6 months. So still pretty new to everything, but hit the ground running with residential and always looking to expand my knowledge with commercial. So excited to learn.
Great. I know Joseph is working with a industrial client right now, actually. So good to have you on here. So and then Steve, how are you doing today?
Hi, Steve Moog. I'm new to the business. I've been with Bliss about 3 months now. And I was previously a small business owner and own a couple retail stores. So I had some experience negotiating my own leases over the years, which is what my interest is now in commercial real estate.
Great, good. And Mr. Fowler, Mr. Daryl Fowler. So you want to introduce yourself? Daryl, can you hear us? I'm not sure Daryl can hear us. So Daryl's been with Bliss for quite a while and he's has a lot of experience. So I'll introduce myself. I'm Sean Brown. I'm the director of commercial. Been with Bliss for just about 5 years now. And like you, Steve, I was a business owner for 25 years. I was in the franchise business and owned multiple franchise restaurants in a 4-state area. And I did all the real estate. I did all my own real estate. I also did real estate for other franchisees as well. And so that's kind of was my background before getting into getting my license 5 years ago. And I've been with Bliss for 5 years. I'm an associate broker and the director of commercial real estate. So so it's a good background to have going into that. So okay, so I'm going to go over, again, what we're going to try to do today is just kind of go through industrial real estate. We're going to talk a little bit about where the industrial market is here in Phoenix first, and then we're going to kind of go over some property characteristics, some property valuation, how to do property searches, types of industrial leases, and then contracts and due diligence. So you don't have to take notes. I have a PDF that I'm going to send. You can take notes, but I'll send out the PDF afterwards, and it'll be available for you guys to take a look at. So let's take a look at what the Phoenix commercial market right now is. So the Phoenix commercial market, as most of you are probably aware, has been extremely tight over the past 2 or 3 years. The demand for industrial real estate in the Valley has been extremely strong, and the supply has been very, very tight. However, we are kind of approaching a period of transition. We have approximately 38 million square feet of industrial real estate coming online in 2023 alone. So there is a lot of construction. There's a lot of supply that's coming on, and most of it is being built. 70% is being built without a tenant in place, so spec. So there's a lot of availability, a lot of space coming on. Actually, a total of 55 million, 38 million this year, but there's 55 million under construction. So, but there's still really strong demand. And a couple problems. Vacancy is risen slightly from it had dropped all the way down to 4%. And 4% vacancy in the commercial world is considered unhealthy. It just doesn't, you need to have a certain amount of vacancy in the market to give fluidity to market, to allow businesses to move and expand or to contract. And 4% is not considered healthy. We're moving up. We should see that increase dramatically to 6 or 7%, which is a healthier vacancy rate. But despite that increase in vacancy rate, we are, still going to continue to see rents rise. And the reason behind that is the fact that there's still a lot of demand for space in the space market. In the demand, the need for people to use industrial space is still extremely strong. It also varies a lot. Most of that 55.5 million square feet that's coming online is large industrial spaces. So there's not enough smaller space, and by smaller I mean 10,000 or less, or even 15,000 square feet or less space. Most of that space is being built for the Amazons of the world and larger users, and because it's a lot easier for the economics make more sense given the construction prices to do that. And so we're still seeing a lot of demand for smaller industrial space, which is a lot more of what I know I work with, because we work with mostly smaller and medium-sized companies, and so there's still a lot of demand for that. So vacancy is rising a little bit, although rents continue to rise. Right now we're at about, the average is a little over $1 a foot, around $13 a foot triple net in the Valley, and that's expected to increase. However, the rate of increase should normalize and to a normal 2 to 3% per year, as opposed to we saw 2022 versus 2021. We saw as much as I think the average was about 15 to 20%, but in some markets, and for smaller space, we saw the rents increase at least 25%, if not more. So rents are going to continue to go up, but not at the same crazy rate. But if you have clients looking for space, you also should tell them that we're not going to necessarily see rents decrease in the market. The demand is just too strong to be forecasted that there be any decrease in rents. Vacancy will decrease a little bit. So any questions on the market? Okay. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about property characteristics and these are questions that you would need to ask if you have a industrial client you come across, or a lead, and you're needing to find out what their requirements are. These are some questions that you need to ask. So, and the first one is it how much office square footage versus warehouse square footage? Typically industrial is made up of two components, warehouse space, and office space. So, sometimes, and a lot of times, clients won't necessarily know the answer to this question. They'll give you things, well, I need 5 offices, or I need, X amount of, square feet. Sometimes they know the square feet usage, or they just need a couple of offices. So, but the more information you can gather on that, the better, because not all industrial spaces or buildings are created the same. Obviously, they're all uniquely different, depending on how they're built out in the past. And you may have some hybrid type spaces too. Doesn't fall neatly in those two different buckets and everything. So there may be manufacturing space that's on there, which brings me to the other part is that do they need the warehouse to be HVA cooled, or is evaporative cooling okay? So this is a key question, because obviously it can convert a warehouse to HVAC, but that's a significant investment, particularly for a tenant to make into a property. So, and a lot of our older industrial product in the Valley is evaporative cooled. So it was definitely, most of the stuff that was built, I don't know, 20th century pre 2000 is going to be evap cooled in the Valley. So there's a lot that you will have users that require HVAC cooled warehouses. So, or at least some that require HVAC areas. So the third big question is the clear height. What are their clear height requirements? So, this obviously allows people to stack for warehouses. It allows them to stack higher. So there's even some storage requirements for large vehicles, or I've even military stuff. And so there, most industrial users have a clear height requirement. Or I shouldn't say most, a lot of them have a clear height requirement. So, we need to determine what the clear height, and the clear height is the height to the rafters. It's not the height of the building. It's the height to the rafters that, something could be stored or stacked inside of the building. So we call that a clear ceiling height. And honestly, you'll see everything from 12 feet to 34 feet. So, I've seen clients that have required 34 feet clear height, which is unusual. So the fourth thing is the number of roll-up doors. And obviously this depends a lot on the type of user, because industrial users can be all over the board, from distributors to manufacturers to contractors. So there's different roll-up doors requirements. So we need to know, the number. We need to know what size, usually the height, but also sometimes the width. And then also can they be at truck level, or do they need to be at grade level with a truck well where they drive down into it to be able to load? So these are questions that you would need to ask a potential client. Do they require a fenced yard, dedicated, or are they able to share a yard, or do they not need a yard at all? That's a question for them. Also, are they okay with multi-tenant, or they need to be a single user, use the whole building? And then the power, how much power is available? So this is a big question for industrial users. Some manufacturers may require 2,000. I have one client that required 3,000 amps on there. So, most are at least 600 amps. So, and that's an expensive upgrade. So when you're doing property searches, that's something that's really important to know. Cool. Any questions on property characteristics? All right, great. So the second thing is to go on a property valuation. So talk a little bit about how we value a industrial property. And this is similar to other property types. We're going to look at comparable sales, and then we're also going to look at the income property valuation. So when you're pulling comparable sales, most of the comparable sales you're going to have are going to be, you can find through CoStar has a lot of those. You may, if you have a Crexi membership, you can also find those too. There are some on the MLS, but the MLS is not super detailed for industrial properties. And that's obviously something that I can help you guys with. One thing to make sure on the comparable sales is you have to make sure you're comparing similar properties. So you need one of the most important things is to make sure the office and warehouse ratios are similar. So if you have a building that's heavily in office, it may be because office is historically more valuable than spaces than industrial space. It's probably valued higher, although that gap the last 3 or 4 years has narrowed quite a bit as industrial property has become more valuable, warehouse property has become more valuable, and office has become stagnated. So obviously you need to comp the sales based on the square footage, but the biggest thing is to compare apples to apples. And then the second thing is to base on income. Currently cap rates, which is the cap rate is the net operating income of the property divided by the price or equals the value of the property, or the value of the property. So right now we're at the cap rate is somewhere in the 6s. It's getting closer to 7. Last year, when it was kind of crazy, the first half of 2022, we saw cap rates go down around 4%. So basically what that means is if someone spent $1 million on a property, it would generate a net income of only $40,000 on that. So now we've seen that grow to about $60,000 on that net, on the value of the property. So properties are, when a cap rate goes up, property value goes down. And the biggest reason behind the cap rate increase is obviously the interest rate increase. So the demand is still very strong, but we have a lot of users who have are not cash buyers, have financing. And when you're financing at 7-8%, a cap rate of 4% just doesn't make any sense. So when valuing the property, we want to try to use actual income if possible. If not, we can use average rents. So, and again, we can get that information from CoStar or the MLS. Property searches. So, now you have a commercial client, they're a buyer or a tenant, they're looking for property, and you got to look for property. So, there's a number of different databases to use. There's a CoStar. I have a CoStar license. You can use CoStar. The public facing side of CoStar is LoopNet, which is they're owned by the same company. CoStar owns LoopNet. LoopNet is a valuable tool. The only thing is that a lot of the listings are out of date on LoopNet, and not all listings are on there because as brokers, we have to pay the listings automatically, or don't automatically, but CoStar does the listings and puts them in. It's a research based. And so they try to have all the properties in CoStar, but in LoopNet, as brokers, we have to pay to be on LoopNet. So for each advertisement. So that's why LoopNet, and that's the public side of CoStar. Crexi has a similar type situation where, and I have a Crexi membership too. You can pay with the Crexi membership, you can advertise listings on there as well. So Crexi is another one to take a look at to find properties. The MLS does have industrial properties on there too. I always do an MLS search too, because there are properties that are on in the MLS that are not on Crexi or on CoStar. So, and so typically if people don't have a CoStar or Crexi license, they may only list them on the MLS. So as you know, we try to list them on all three to create the greatest exposure for our clients as possible. But you would want to search on the MLS too. You know, typically you won't see as many on the MLS, but it's definitely one that you need to search, and also reach out to other brokers. So again, the same, you know, when we do the property searches, all those questions that we asked earlier, we want to utilize those to look for the properties. The other thing that's really important for the search is also, and to talk to your client about, is where do they need to be close to in terms of location. Location for industrial uses is different and everything. So a lot of times they need to be close to transportation. They need to be close to a freeway. They need to be close to, occasionally they need rail access. That's something definitely to ask if you have a larger user, if they need rail service. So there is rail service in East Valley. There are properties that are rail served, but most are going to be okay with being close to one of the freeways. Also close to their clients or their suppliers. These are other things that are going to make a difference in terms of location. One of the most important things is they want to be close to ownership, to the CEO, usually the CEOs or the ownership's home and everything. So, but they, a lot of times they take into account the employees as well. So, the other thing is that they may have geographic requirements based on where their employees live. Cool. Any questions on property searches? Okay, so leasing. So, obviously we work with two different, there's two different worlds in commercial real estate. There's leasing and sales, landlords and tenants, buyers and sellers. And we also think of it in terms of the space market and the capital market in commercial real estate. So we're, in the space market, we have people that are looking to utilize or use commercial space. And now they have the option to either lease or buy in that space. And in the capital market are people that are looking to invest in commercial real estate. Sometimes those are owner users, and sometimes those are investors who are looking to lease to users. So talking about industrial leases, there's basically, in the leasing world, there's two types of leases. There's a million types of leases, but there's two extremes. There is the gross lease, where the landlord or owner of the property pays all of the expenses. The tenant pays a flat fee, a flat rate, and then the owner pays all the expenses out of that. Typically, we only see that in multi-tenant office buildings, and then the other extreme is a triple net lease. And a triple net lease is where the tenant pays a base rent, and all of the expenses are passed on to the tenant. Either the tenant pays them directly, or the tenant or the landlord passes those expenses onto the tenant. So, and then there's everything in between. You almost never see, the only time you see an absolute true net lease is usually in a sale leaseback for a single tenant user. And the only time that you usually see a full service gross lease is in a higher end full service multi-tenant. Most of the time you're going to be somewhere in between. The landlord's going to pay some expenses and the tenant's going to pay some expenses. Although we typically see them closer to the triple net side, even in industrial leases now. So most industrial leases today are triple net leases. You will see leases referred to as industrial or modified gross. Typically in that the tenant pays their own expense, their own maintenance expenses, and the utilities are separately metered. But then the landlord pays the property taxes and then the insurance on the building. So again, when we're dealing with leases, if you're representing a buyer or a tenant, you need to get as much information about what type of lease the landlord has. And all that's negotiable too, but upfront in order so that you can compare apples to apples. Because if you're comparing two different locations and they're both say that they're industrial or modified gross leases, that may mean two completely different things. So we need to always ascertain what expenses the tenant is responsible and what expenses the landlord is responsible for. Lease terms typically in industrial real estate range from 3 to 10 years, with the average probably being 5 years. Smaller users with minimal tenant improvements, you may see 3 years. Larger users with substantial tenant improvements, you'll see longer leases of 7 to 10 years. And again, we always try to get options on those. Industrial real estate's a little bit different than other types of commercial real estate in that lease rates are usually expressed in monthly terms as opposed to annual terms. So if you have a retail lease, or which Steve, like you may be familiar with, or you have an office lease, usually those numbers are always expressed in an annual number. $24 a foot, $30 a foot. Industrial leases are almost always expressed in monthly terms, like $1 a foot, $1.25 a foot. So that's something to be familiar with. So with leases, typically what we do, and we've covered this in other trainings, but we do a letter of intent. If you're representing a buyer or tenant, you do a letter of intent and negotiate a letter of intent of all the main business points of the lease. That's non-binding on either party. The who, what, when, where of the property, and negotiate all those. And then if we can agree on all those, then we go to a full lease. I do recommend my clients have an attorney review the full lease and work with them. Even though as real estate agents, we're legally allowed to review leases. Number one, it's a very time consuming process. And number two is it's a contractual legal agreement that, and I've literally done in both my current position and in my previous life, hundreds of leases, if not close to 1,000 leases. But even then, I would not say I'm completely qualified to negotiate all the legalese that's in a lease. And so I always recommend that they have an attorney review the lease. Sometimes I do the negotiating for the lease negotiations, but at least have them have an attorney review it. Any questions on leases? Nope. Okay, cool. Well, last thing that I kind of want to cover today is contracts and due diligence. So we talked a little bit about leasing. Let's talk a little bit, kind of like I said, this is an introduction. So talk a little bit about if we're representing a buyer or a seller in a sale transaction for industrial real estate. The process works similar. You have a property search. You need to go out and take a look at properties. Once we narrow that down, and then we take a look at the properties, and then if the client decides there's a property they want to make an offer on, we do a letter of intent as well. And negotiate all the key points of that. And then if that works out, we do a PSA, a purchase and sale agreement. I prefer to use the commercial, the AAR commercial purchase contract, because number one, it's free. for all of us that work for Bliss and our realtors. There are other good contracts. AIR contract is another good one. And then we negotiate the contract. So sometimes you may have one or both of the parties want to introduce attorneys into the contract negotiation part, and that's certainly fine. Just know that that attorneys always write the contracts heavily in favor of their client, and that will make your job a lot harder of getting a deal done. So that's one of the reasons I recommend the AAR contract. Is it's a contract that protects the brokers involved, and it's also a very fair contract to both parties. So and unless it's a specialized transaction, I found most commercial transactions of the size we deal with in Arizona can be handled pretty easily with the commercial purchase contract, used AAR or the AIR contract. And it works similar to a residential contract. There's some contingency periods that need to be through the due diligence, though, is completely different. Obviously there's a physical inspection that we need to go through, which with the physical inspection, we're less looking for cosmetic issues as we're looking for deferred maintenance, and what type on the property, what maintenance hasn't been done, what weight maintenance needs to be done over, in the near future. So we have a physical inspection. We also have to use one of the biggest things with industrial is a use inspection. So, be able to make sure, we need to be able to verify with the city that we'll be able to use the property for its intended use, for what our client's intended use is. We need to verify code violations, zoning, city compliance. There's obviously a lot of title. This is more detailed than we have time for on this call, but there's a title. We need to take at liens, any issues with CC&Rs. Sometimes properties are in building owners associations, or they may be part of a larger industrial park. And so we need to take a look at the CC&Rs and make sure that our client's use is going to be okay there. If we're representing an investor, we need to take a look at the leases, the rental payment history, financial statements, management agreements, and we need to, most importantly, get estoppels from all of the tenants, and verifying that what the lease information is. So, because we don't want post close information coming out concerning a lease that our client didn't know about, and a client saying, "Oh no, I had this addendum that lowered my rent by $3 a square foot, per year." And so, we need to get an estoppel from each one of the tenants saying that yes, these are the terms of the agreement. Other due diligence that needs to be done: if there's financing and appraisal, a lot of times there's a survey. I always recommend my clients get a survey. A lot of times they decline, but it's always good to have a survey, and it depends a little bit on the property, but whether they need one or not, but I always recommend one. And then phase one environmental, if there's a bank involved, that'll almost always be required to have a phase one environmental inspection. So, and I have a referral, if anybody needs referrals of those people, I have referrals for those. All right, cool. So that was a huge download of information in a very short period of time. So now I just, if anybody has any, I'll just do Q&A. If anybody has any questions about industrial real estate. And again, like I said, I have a PDF that I'll send out with all that information on it. But if you have any questions regarding the industrial real estate market or doing industrial real estate, now's the time. Nope. Hi, Stephanie. All right, well, thanks everyone for coming. If nobody has any questions, it's 10:40, so I'll give you back 20 minutes of your day, and I appreciate everyone coming. And if you need any help, you can reach out to me. I'll send out my contact information with the PDF, and I'll certainly be willing to talk to you more. All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
Thanks.